Hey everyone. So yeah, it's hard to believe. We're here with page 74. We are basically one page away from the 75th page of the Stripes and Links story, very zigzag centric story from Sabrina Online. And we're still continuing on with Zigzag here, visiting her father. And basically we leave off. If I can double check here, we leave off on the fact that he's kind of the father that is he's kind of taking responsibility for what he did. You know, so we start off page 74 with Zigzag asking him. She's basically asking him, "So what are you in for?" Specifically. So she wants like details, like, okay, why are you in the slammer outside of what she already knows about? And the father's response is, oh, the usual domestic disturbance, drunken disorderly, a lot of quote unquote D stuff. And then he admits that his big mistake was he tried to beat the crap of a, often he basically tried to basically he says that his big mistake outside of course the domestic disturbance, drunken disorderly, a lot of quote unquote D stuff. He says that his big mistake was he tried to beat the butt off of the officer who came after him, and that he was winning until his buddies pulled out their tasers. And of course, this kind of intrigues Zigzag a little bit. When she's like, and you know, um, then the father basically tells her, after Zigzag's response to him saying, "Oh yeah, I was winning" and all that, until the other cops pulled out their tasers. Zigzag's response is, and then the father tells her, "I'll be getting out in a few years if I keep my nose clean until then." And Zigzag's like, very carefully, very cautiously, she asks, "What will you do then? Would you try to connect with mom?" And then the father, in a surprising twist here, basically says, "Nah, I'm pretty sure that train has sailed. I loved Ellie, and we were really good together for a while. I was happy to settle down with her." So yeah, the father's basically admitting that, even if he tried, there's no chance, that would happen. That basically the father's saying, hey, if I get out, if I behave myself and I get out, that there's no way he could reconnect with the mother, with Zigzag's mom. He's basically acknowledging there's no chance of that happening. That basically if he tried, there could be precautions. Or not precautions, but repercussions, I should say. And then the father goes on to say that she might have been the best thing to ever happen to him, but it turned out that I'm no good for her. She don't need me around anymore. Best for me to just stay away. So the father's basically, surprisingly, like I said, admitting that he loved the mother and everything, and that she was the best thing for him, and he was happy to settle down with her. It's just that he, basically turned out not to be exactly the knight in shining armor she was hoping for. And that I think he realizes that if he tried to reconnect, like I mentioned earlier, there could be repercussions. And he's just realizing that it'd be best for him to just stay away from her for right now, or at least for good. Because again, he's realizing if he tries, could be repercussions. Then Zigzag's response is, "That's fine. That her and her siblings, Brandy and Brandon, can look after the mom from here on in, or from here on in." And then the father's response is, "Good, good thing someone is, or I might have to come back." And in Zigzag, we end the comic page here with her saying, "Don't make it sound so threatening." So basically, this one was actually decent. The father, surprisingly, still scumbag and all that, is taking responsibility. He's taking responsibility for what he did. He's acknowledging that basically he, at first, that he's basically, acknowledging that at first him and Ellie, Zigzag's mom, they were good together. They were perfect for each other, and that he was happy, thrilled, to settle down with her, and that she might have been the best thing to ever happen to him, but he turned out he was no good for her. Basically, he's acknowledging, hey, she was the good, she was the light, I was the bad, I was the darkness. She was the water, I was the oil, and we just eventually didn't mix anymore. And he's basically saying she don't need me around anymore. Best for me to stay away because the kids are grown up. The kids are grown up. They're on their own. And basically, he's saying, look, I have no reason to be there, whatsoever. And you can tell by Zigzag's expression that she's kind of believes him, but not really. It's like it's kind of like it's kind of like eternally it's getting to her. Like again, she wants to believe him, but not really. Like she doesn't know if he's sincere or not. And then her response of her and her siblings, that well basically her response back of saying, hey, it's okay, it's fine. Me and my siblings, me, Brandy and Brandon can look after her from that. Look after the mother from there on in. And then the father saying good thing someone is, or he might have to come back. And Zigzag's response of don't make it sound so threatening. So basically, the father is like happy at least that their children are checking in and taking care of their mom, if you will. He's glad about that. Or he might have to basically, which obviously he doesn't want to do. He says, hey, I'm glad somebody's doing it, or I might have to step in. I might have to do it myself. And Zigzag's response is, "Hey, don't make it sound so threatening," because to her, him by him saying, "Hey, I might have to come back if someone's not watching her," to Zigzag, that's basically like a threat. Like, hey, you're threatening to come back and probably do something you shouldn't. Basically Zigzag saying, "Hey, don't make it sound so threatening, and stick to what your original plan is going to be should you get out." So, so overall, like I do like this the 74th page here. Again, you could see that the father is, even though he's still a scumbag, like I said, he's kind of regretting, just having this discussion with Zigzag, which obviously looks like it was needed. He's just, the father obviously regrets what he did. He's realizing, hey, I made a mistake, and I lost pretty much what was a good thing. I lost pretty much what was a good thing, and that's on me. That's on me, and all that. And it's nice to see him, take that responsibility, kind of acknowledge the mistake he made, and everything. So, that's good on him. That's good on him, but still, he's got to pay for what he's done. And obviously, hold on for a sec. Okay, sorry about that, guys. That was the phone ringing. I had to answer it. But like I said, it is good that the father is at least taking responsibility. But again, you can tell he's still a scumbag just by the fact that at the end he's saying, hey, his response to Zigzag saying, "Hey, that's cool and everything. Me and my siblings can watch after mom from here on in and all that." I like how I like how she's basically telling him, "Hey, don't make what you just sound so threatening." Because the father is like, he's happy. I guess you kind of could say he's happy that, he's glad to be hearing that. He's glad that at least, their kids are, checking in on her, you know. But that, that basically because if they didn't do that, if someone didn't do that, he might have to do it on his own and everything, So I'm just looking out the window, guys. Looking at a cat in front of our yard. Just looking around. But anyway, it's kind of it's like I said, it's kind of interesting to see that he's still kind of a, very low down person, but he does kind of regret what he's done, but he still has those habits because again, Zigzag said, "Hey, don't make what you just said sound threatening," because again, the father's saying, "Hey, it's a good thing you guys are doing that. You're checking in on with your mom because if you don't, I might have to, come on back into the picture." And Zigzag's like, "Hey, you keep your distance like you're planning to do. You just stay away, move on with your life after you get out, if you do, and just leave mom being taken care of and watched over by us." So yeah, overall it's a decent page, and it looks like we are wrapping up the visitation between Zigzag and the father. Zigzag visiting the father in prison. It sounds like they are kind of slowly reconciling, but not really. It's like, basically Zigzag, you can tell she still cares about her father, but, she's not going to forgive him for what he did to her and all that. So we'll see what happens in page 75, if that's going to wrap things up. But yeah, it's kind of surprising. Well, it shouldn't be too surprising because that kind of situation will change people. But it is kind of nice to see, or at least satisfactory to see the father at least taking responsibility and regretting his decisions. Because as he basically put it, he lost a good thing. He did. He lost a good thing in his wife, and now he's paying for it. But overall, I thought it was a good continuation, and can't wait to see what they do with page 75 next week. 75 pages. That's hard to believe. This is pretty much confirming that this is the longest Sabrina Sabrina online story we've ever had, and it's mostly zigzag centric. So that's kind of cool. And honestly, in my opinion, I think I know why it's long and why it's zigzag centric, because this is a lot of lore. This is a lot of backstory, lore, and just a lot of information about the character we've been wanting to find out about for quite some time, and now we're getting it. And pretty much it takes her having her own book, her own, I guess you could say, backdoor pilot, you know, to kind of tell her story, and see if maybe there might be interest in seeing a zigzag centric, uh, I guess you could say, web comic, going forward after this to run alongside the Sabrina one. But that's just my opinion. We'll see what they do. But I like where this is going, and can't wait to see what happens. Again, my take as to when I think you could wrap up, at the earliest. My take, the earliest could be holiday season, between November and Christmas of this year, and basically the exact point could be the beginning of next year, and that more than likely, if they want to go, up until March of next year, then I can see it going up to about 2 years. I think about 2 years worth of story if they do that. So it'll either end by the holiday season this year, or it might end at the beginning of next year, or it might even end at the 2 year, the 2 year point, basically in spring of next year. So in other words, it started in spring of 2024, and now it's going to pretty much conclude in the spring of 2026 if it goes that distance, if you know what I mean. But yeah, I like it, and I kind of still stick by how I think it's going to end. I think it's going to end on a humorous note with Endora giving Zigzag a taste of her own medicine, of kissing her on the lips as a way of saying, "Hey, I forgive you," and maybe even saying, "Hey, I also have to thank you because you woke up beside of me. I haven't had, I haven't, I haven't seen or laid dormant for a while, so." Maybe she might want to go out and still with Zigzag, have a little fun, and maybe Zigzag can help her wake up or keep that side of her awake, if you will. Be interesting to see if that happens. I'm still kind of convinced that Eric is going to do a Fur After Dark tie-in story down the line, and it's going to involve it's either going to involve Zigzag and Tina Lynx. Tina Lynx is a bisexual lover who's on the road with her during this trip, getting it on in one of the hotels. Or it could involve Zigzag and Endora to kind of wrap that up. Or it might involve Endora and Warren, because, doing what they were doing while they were getting frisky, which caused Sabrina and Tabitha, the sisters, to kind of head for the heels, known as Double Z Studios, to hide out for a bit. But we'll see what they do. We'll see what happens. But let me know what your thoughts are, guys. Comment down below, like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel. Also, click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, as well as on the top link to go to my new Fourth Wall store, and the bottom link to go to my OG Teespring store for merchandise you can't get anywhere else. Also, if you did already, and if not, that's fine. Super chats were open. Hopefully, you might have saw that and helped, comment there. Did a little bit of a live chat discussion there if you did, and if not, that's fine. Super thanks will be open after the premiere of this video if you want to help donate that way. Also, you can support me over at Patreon and at Venmo and Cash App. We greatly appreciate it if you did that. And also check out my podcast at all your favorite podcast affiliates. Wherever there's a podcast, from iTunes, iHeart, Spotify, Pandora, SiriusXM to an extent, Audible, Radio Public, wherever there's a podcast, more than likely you'll find mine as well. So again, guys, that's all I'm going to say for now. Give me your thoughts on the 74th page. How much longer do you think the story will go for? Do you think it'll go into the holiday season? Or do you think it'll go to at least the beginning of the new year? Or do you think it might even go to the 2 year route, which will mean it concludes in spring of next year? Let me know what your thoughts are, and until then, I'm out.